Hi, everyone. My name is Kirk Bachman, and welcome back to The Ultimate Dish. Today, I'm speaking with Bryan Dayton, founder of Half Eaten Cookie Hospitality, an elite restaurant group based right here in Colorado. But it doesn't stop there. Bryan is also an award-winning mixologist, beverage director, decorated ultramarathoner, and trail runner. As a restaurateur, Bryan's portfolio includes award-winning restaurants, Oak at 14th, Corita, Acorn, and Brighter, which are all applauded by Bon Appetit, Food and Wine, and Esquire, just to name a few. Prior to owning restaurants, Bryan spent time with Colorado's acclaimed Frasca Food and Wine and managed his own cocktail catering service called Sweet and Sour Cocktails. So join me today as I chat with Bryan about tapping into his passion for beverages, building a restaurant group from the ground up, and how sports and restaurant life intersect. And there he is. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Thanks for having me. I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing great, doing great. I'm in the office
Great.
here. You probably can't see everything, but as I look around, I got Marco Pierre White back here. I've got Escoffier up on the wall. I'm looking at Farmer Lee's cookbook. I'm looking at, Eric Repair's cookbook, the Beaucoup d'Or, and I'm thinking to myself, I know how busy those folks are, and I know how busy you are. So for you to take a little bit of time, this is the best part of my day, perhaps my week, quite honestly, probably my month. And just to take a little bit of time to chat with us and our growing audience, really, really appreciate it. Where are you? It looks familiar to me.
Absolutely. I'm at Corita restaurant right now, so I'm sitting at the bar. So I'm looking at some bottles of booze and some wine glasses, and it's a little bit early, so I'll leave them empty for the time being.
It's a good place to be at 9:30, right?
That's right.
I love it. So always a pleasure to chat with the guests that we have on the show. But you're a local celebrity, very very well known, super busy, and this is exciting to me. And before we
Thank
dive
you.
into all of your endeavors, if we if you will, we're both so fortunate to live in such an amazing area of the country. I moved here. Well, my family's on the Western Slope, has been since the 70s, but spent a lot of time in Chicago. Got back here to the Boulder area about 8 years ago, and so thankful. Um, and you and I will understand what I'm about to say. Many others might not, but so the family and I skied at Ski Cooper up in Leadville last week, and we hung out in Leadville a little bit. And I was thinking about the Leadville 100, and I started thinking about you and our chat, and I wondered, not to put you on the spot, but Colorado is beautiful. I mean, 54 14ers, countless ski areas. Just to kick it off, what do you do? I mean, you're busy. You got the restaurants, all these employees that you've got to be thoughtful and considerate of. But is there a podium? Is there a stacked ranking of favorite watering holes, favorite runs, ski runs or runs, ski areas? What's the go-to for Bryan?
Yeah, you're right. We are super fortunate and super spoiled, and I've been in Colorado since 1991, and off and on. And my first job here was I actually was working as a busboy up at Mary Jane Cafeteria at Winter Park. And so, yeah, so the mountains have been part of my life since an early age. I was 18, and here I still am, and able to look at the Flatirons right now, and super fortunate with that. But yeah, I mean, anything around the state is something that really I enjoy. Favorite watering holes, I have to say, here in Boulder, when I get the chance, would definitely be the Sundown Saloon. I like to keep it,
Oh, nice.
basic and great.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I've known the owners forever, and great people, and a good place to play a game of pool and relax, and not think too much about it. And then, yeah, as far as skiing goes, the skiing has evolved from the days at Mary Jane and Winter Park, where is doing that to anywhere across the state. I have to admit, I love Silverton. I'm pretty addicted to being down there
Oh,
as much
wow.
as we can, and so
Yeah.
it's definitely try to hit that place up at least a time or two a year. And so yeah, so there's a lot there. And then as far as running goes, I mean, you nailed it in Leadville, and I've done so many races up there in the snow and in the summertime, and the Leadville 100, and I love those trails up there and access to the 14ers. And yeah, that's definitely where, if I have my free time, I'm either with my two children, or I'm trail running or skiing, and then back to the grind for sure.
One thing that struck me, and you forget, right? I grew up in kind of the Gunnison Crested Butte area, so I was pretty familiar
Yep.
with high
Love it.
altitude. But man, Leadville, 11,500, or maybe that's the ski area. Um, it's so many people can't appreciate, the beauty, and no matter what, um, our kids are flipping from skiing to snowboarding, so we put them up there because they have the greatest ski school in the state.
Nice.
Anytime I'm up there, there's no one there. Why
Right.
why have people not discovered Ski Cooper, right? It's a little secret.
It's fortunate to be off the just enough off the I-70 corridor. Nobody thinks about it, and it's small enough that nobody thinks about it too. So
Yeah,
I've had
yeah.
some good laps up there for sure over the years, and I've done some overnight skinning in there. We did a hut up there a few years ago too. I can't remember what the name of the hut was, but just outside of there, it was absolutely amazing.
Very nice.
Super
Very
beautiful.
nice. So here's probably the easiest question. So it sounds like your passion for the restaurant world and hospitality in general started at a young age. What's that transition like from and everybody kind of talks about it differently, but from busser to waiter, I did it too. I went the kitchen route, eventually to bar manager, and so on and so forth. What was there that pivotal moment where you're like, you know what, I really like this, and this is what I want to do? Was there a mentor? Was there a moment that just triggered your passion for this industry?
The kind of same route, the classic story with all of us that are in the business. Traditionally, it's, you start off as a dishwasher. I started washing dishes, small mom and pop restaurant in my hometown, and little Italian joint scrubbing lasagna pans. I remember that. And then went on and actually worked at a barbecue restaurant for a couple of years in my same. I grew up in Middle Tennessee. And so that space is always kind of fun, but big barbecue. And so I worked at a barbecue restaurant for the last 2 years of high school. And I love the business. I just always, it was, I don't know, there was something about being around food. There was something about being around the excitement of the social atmosphere of it. And then kind of, I got that bug, and I knew, like, in college, and I bounced around, done some different jobs. I worked in a small cattle ranch in Southeast Idaho. And in those transitions, I always came back to the hospitality and to restaurants. And I knew at 20, I wanted to be a bartender and open my own restaurant someday.
I love it. I love it. Perfect transition. We'll talk a little bit more about the beverage world, but you know, we're starting to see that term mixology again and again and again. And I'm talking about it a lot, even from a literacy and an education perspective. But you've been in the industry for a while. What's changed, and what's better, what's worse, and is mixology, God, is it a trend, or is it like, really, is it here to stay, and is it going to just continue to escalate?
I think that, during my career, I was very fortunate to be right on the transition of that from bartending to what we, talk about mixology today. My crew, that we all went through that same time period with, we always refer to ourselves as bartenders.
Mm-hmm.
Mixology, I do think, is here to stay, which is great. It's great that you can go into many different cocktail bars, go to the airport, be able to go even to a baseball or basketball game and get some sort of a cocktail now, other than just a vodka soda or Jack and Coke or something. So that's great. And I love that trend. I think it'll keep evolving the way that it has. I don't think that you'll see quite the trajectory that we saw in the mid 2000s, where it really was, we were all wearing the driving caps
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
and the vest and everything else. And thank goodness we've evolved past that. But it's a good trend, and it's just like on that same parallel path that culinary is. It's like, hey, like, I don't think anybody's, it's hard to push the envelope after a certain amount of time, because in anything, it's not even in the culinary world and just the world, unless you're really driving the force in tech. And so I think with mixology and in the culinary world, it's about harnessing your craft and getting better with it, and really pushing forward and taking those old techniques and keeping it fresh and new, and using classic spirits, but then also things that are coming out nowadays. And I think it's a great trend, and I think it's a great experience for the guests, and things that are new, and things that we can even extend where the guest doesn't have to necessarily come see us. They can make it at their house now. And so I think all of those things are really positive. And so no, I'm very fortunate time in my life that really helped my career was the mixology trend. And yeah, I think that, that's why I'm sitting here right now, is it really helped me.
Yeah, yeah, well said. So closer to the beginning of the year, I was fortunate enough to grab a reservation at one of the Globes that's over your shoulder there on the
Yeah.
rooftop. So our viewers know where Bryan's sitting right now is on the second floor. We're on Walnut Street of his kind of Spanish themed Corrida, which is an absolutely stunning and beautiful restaurant. But one thing that really stood out for me that sort of aligns with what you just said is, myself and my party came in. We were sitting right where you are right now, and it was, I don't know, 20, 25 minutes of a show, right? So we sat down, we were greeted beautifully, and we chatted a little bit with the team, and we just started talking about drinks. It wasn't like you say, I'll have a vodka 7, I'll have this, I'll have that. It was like, here's what we're featuring tonight. Let me talk about them a little bit. And it was like a show, right? And high five to all of the folks, and there were some friends of mine around the bar, and it just felt like, wow, this is a different experience, and I imagine people are looking for that today, right? And so we spent, a good, half hour, 45 minutes just there enjoying that experience before we actually went to dine. So I felt like it was, 2 for 1 that night. And
Nice.
is that the goal really? It's like, hey, come to the bar, maybe have some snacks, and we're going to put on a show for you right here. This is no longer an also ran. This is part of maybe it's the showstopper, right? Maybe it's the headliner, right?
Right, right. I think, very fortunate all the team members are cranking, no matter behind the bar or on the floor and in the kitchen and everywhere, because it's one team, one dream, But I do think, like,
I love
the
that.
team is very passionate and very excited about what they're doing and what we have to offer. And so, and that just makes it, that much better for the guest experience. And so really to really have everybody push in and being like, hey, this is what we had to offer. These are different things. And it is different when you come to Corrida, we're the Spanish inspired chop house. And, the not only is the food so vastly different, but then also is, anything to imbibe with, the drinks on the Iberian Peninsula are vast. Obviously you have the wine culture, you have the vermouth culture, you have the gin and tonic culture, you have the sherry culture, you have the cider culture. So, and then obviously everybody's drinking beer all the time as well. So it's always, this thing. So it lays out honestly an easier path for us to really be like, hey, there's so many options, and this is what we have, and really look at it. So, but yeah, to really get into that side of, whether it's the show or hospitality, and really like bring people into the fold and make people feel what I call about is like the warm blanket of hospitality. And we always talk about, hey, we want people to feel, warm and cozy. They may have not have remembered what they drank. They may not have remembered what they ate that night, in a couple of weeks, but they're always going to remember how they felt, right? And I always say, hey, if we can leave, each guest with this subliminal warm blanket of hospitality, they're going to remember that cozy, warm feeling, and they're going to want to come back for more.
I love that. Such poignant and beautiful words. And the students that'll listen to this will be very appreciative. And the theme goes from restaurant to restaurant, right? Our listeners going to think that all I do is go to the bar of Bryan's restaurants, but we went to go
We got
see
to keep the lights on somehow,
we do, and I love being a part of that. We went to go see the Big Lebowski the other night
Oh, nice.
with a couple of friends, and we got lucky. We just walked into Oak and we got the seat at the bar, and it's exactly what you said. We, had a lovely bartender who, told stories, and recent grad of CU, so we ended up talking about Dion and
Nice.
again, it was just a really nice experience. Chef came over, said hello. It's just, I love the warm blanket of hospitality. It's beautifully, beautifully said. So,
For
so, so,
sure.
so Bryan, on top of being a certified sommelier, you graduated from the beverage alcohol resource program with honors. and you also started the Colorado chapter of the United States Bartenders Guild. First and foremost, what propelled you? So, so you're having a good time. You like the industry, you like what you're doing. I love the connection to education. I love that you're escalating yourself. What propelled you to enroll in a program like that and pursue higher education?
There were several different, transition periods of my career. Obviously, I knew, like I said earlier, I knew at age 20, I wanted to open my own restaurant. I knew I wanted to be a bartender. I wasn't even 21 yet. And then I went on to become a bartender, and I eventually opened up, Oak at the age of 37. So it took 17 years to get there, just mind you. So a slow learner. And so, but when, my late 20s, I was, made that decision where it's like, hey, like, I think like a lot of people do, where it's like, is this going to become a career, or do you need to do something else with your life? And I knew, like, I loved hospitality. I still want to open my own restaurant one day. I knew that I wanted to be the best bartender I could be, and really excel at that. I've always, like, from my running to other things in life, a fairly competitive person. And so at that point of my life was, my late 20s, going into early 30s, knowing like, hey, I really need to take this serious and transition, and from being just a normal bartender or restaurant person to what is that next level. I was fortunate enough at that time in my life to meet Bobby Stuckey, totally random, through a running event. And then him and I became good friends, and I ended up working for him for 5 years before we opened up Oak at Frosca Food and Wine. And so at that time, being around in that arena, really pushing the envelope on wine education, food education, everything along those lines, really made me want to become hungrier as well, because I'd already had like my chops and had learned a lot about wine, learned a lot about like scotches, started to learn a little bit about Japanese whiskeys, herbal liqueurs, things like that. And then at that time, the Beverage Alcohol Resource Program was created. Steve Olson, Andy Seymour, Dale DeGroff, really the heavy hitters that were in mixology and in the wine world. And I saw the opportunity to jump at that, and was like, I want to learn as much as I can, learn how to taste spirits, learn how to make cocktails better, learn how to work cleaner. All those things to elevate my craft was very important to me, because, you can either stand still or you can keep moving forward. And so one thing in life, it's always going to evolve. It's always going to change. And so in my opinion, it's like, if it's going to evolve and change, we should be pushing the envelope to get better every day.
Great advice. That's TikTok stuff right there, by the way. Totally going to jump all over that. So in addition, to the relationships and, Bobby and so many others, first of all, we're really spoiled to have both you and Bobby in our little town of 120,000 people or whatever it is. But are there other sort of characteristics or memories or even skills that you learned as you obtained, certification and more education, that you find still inform and empower your decision making today as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think like it's always evolving. And the past few years in the restaurant business has been a lot of evolving. And so going through the COVID experience. And so, it's foundationally, to have that hunger, to have that want to really like educate yourself to get better. That way you become a better person yourself, then you become a better teacher when you're talking to your teams, and just a little things like that. As much as my life's changed now that we have 5 different restaurants, and I'm evolving, and I'm not as day to day as I would be on the floor normally, but I'm still able to talk to the teams about little foundational things of like this, and this, and guide my management teams into thinking outside the box and how do they get better, and what does that look like for us.
I love you're a better teacher when you're teaching. So very true. That's it's really aligned with even the culture of culinary education today. It used to be, knowledge was kept in the toque, right? So you had to go to culinary school, or you had to do an apprenticeship, you had to do something because you had to get that knowledge. This day and age, my guidance to our team here is, to really just try to be a great facilitator of knowledge, because knowledge is everywhere. You know, our students have it in here, and
Yep.
so I love that quote for someone, Bryan, who might be listening and might be really intrigued by the cocktail culture today. Are there some important steps or missteps that are really critical to take?
I think, yeah, I think like learning your base spirits, learning, foundationally how to make a great old fashioned, make a great margarita,
Yeah.
making some of those just like classic cocktails and building off those theories of what a classic cocktail is, which, excuse me, just a little, you know, a spirit, a little bit of water, a little bit of a bitter, a little bit of a sugar, maybe some acid. Again, and you're building off of that and really thinking about spirits in the same way, in my opinion, like terroir based, just like you would like wines and things along those lines. So, just thinking like, hey, this is a rum based spirit, and where does rum come from? It comes from warmer climates. It comes from, where there's a lot of citrus. There's bananas. There's all kinds of things that are in there. A lot of herbs. A lot of vegetal ideas, and kind of building your cocktails around that. I always say less is more, and just really kind of studying those, and that way you're balancing everything out as you move forward in your career. So try to, baby steps and small steps, as long as you're moving up the hill, get you to the top of the mountain just as fast as if you're running and fall out of breath, right? And so the results will be the same, and sometimes it's a little bit easier just to take your time.
Yeah, yeah, great analogies. So it just reminded me as I was listening to you from a relationship perspective and a strategy perspective with Chef Samuel and the team. Is it cocktail first? Is it beverage first? Is it food first and then you're marrying it? Tough question. Or is it just kind of come together beautifully, almost serendipitously?
I think for us, it's all together. We want to push, again, especially in this environment at Carita and at Oak. I mean, Oak's foundational, which is our our flagship restaurant. It was brought together, the name Oak, and the reason that we brought Oak together, and then the name, which was, my business partner and I, Steve, was easy to spell for us, so that made it easy. But it was based around the wood fire grill that we burn white oak in, and then it was also based around the spirit culture, the wine culture, the beverage culture that was always in oak barrels. And so, from a very long time ago, whether it was beer, wine, gin, whatever it was always aged in barrels, because that was a transportation method at that point in history. And so really blending those two worlds have always been really important, and really like providing to us, we're providing, we get to throw, the best part of our job is we throw dinner parties every night. And in a dinner party is, it has great cocktails, has great food, has great wines, has great non-alcoholic options, which has always been part of our program. You see a lot of that today, and getting a lot of press on the non-alc thing. Day one, 12 years ago, we've had non-alcoholic options for mothers to be, for people that may be recovering, for designated drivers, people that want to be healthy and that were maybe like extreme athletes. So, but we always wanted to bring them into the fold to make them feel really good, no matter what that experience was. Instead of just being able to get a cranberry and soda, it's like, hey, no, here's a beautiful cocktail that you feel good, and all of a sudden your experience changes, and you bring a cocktail that looks just as pretty, if not prettier, than the other cocktails that you bring to the table, and then minds blown. And so, so it's been very important to us to really, have both the culinary world and beverage world to be very parallel. And I've been very fortunate to have amazing chefs that are my chef partners, that have kept me on my toes and pushed the envelope, and really, have a great experience.
I love it. Such a great answer. More TikTok reels there. Um,
I gotta
we
download that.
you do. We throw a dinner party every night. I mean, brilliant, brilliant. Hey, so I'm going to embarrass you a little bit. Back in
Okay.
2011, you outdid dozens of mixologists around the world. I did not know that this was a thing, but you were the GQ Bombay Sapphire's most inspired bartender in the country. You got to walk me through that. That's absolutely spectacular.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a lot of fun that, going into, again, that time period of, and still today, mixology is really about how do we get better with pushing the envelope? How do we get better with different cocktail competitions, things along those lines? And I had the opportunity to be part of some cocktail competitions. I won basically how it worked was like you got to compete at a local state level. And then if you won that, you got to go to the national level. And then once you went to the national level, and if you won that, you got to go to the international level. I was fortunate enough to win the state and then was fortunate enough to win, yes, the United States most inspired Bombay Sapphire bartender of the year, the GQ magazine. It was amazing. Yeah, I was a lot younger then. My hair was a little bit darker, um, but but it was awesome. It was super fun, great experience, and then we got to go to Morocco and compete later that fall or that next spring, and that was a lot of fun as well.
That's amazing. Congratulations. I mean, and
Thank
it
you.
probably introduced you to other people, more probably friends still to this day, right? That's what I love about, people that have a passion for a craft that come together, and competition is healthy, right? It's important. Is this a competition that still occurs through GQ? And
It is. It's actually the state ones are going on right now. I just saw some competitions going on the past week. I think there was one down in Miami last week, and so yeah, so they still go on, and there's all kinds of different cocktail competitions that go on all the time. So yeah, and you're absolutely right. Like that was the one thing. It was very fortunate at that time period was to make friends through Beverage Alcohol Resource Program, through open up the Bartenders Guild here in Colorado, to open to the cocktail competitions. Some of those friends are, my friends. I just had, lunch with a couple of them the other day. Where there's a cocktail thing doing it in a couple of weeks from now up in the mountains. That all from that time period are very dear and true friends. We've known each other now, going on almost 15 years, which is great. So super fun, super different.
that's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about your restaurant group, Half Eaten Cookie Hospitality. I love it. You know what and again, it's easy for me to be the Monday morning quarterback, but man, it it's a simple website, right? It's clean, and that's what I love. It basically, I'm obsessed with mission and vision. Obviously, we've got to have mission and vision in our business, so I'm always kind of looking for um, little nuggets of what fuel people, right? And so I'd love to talk about what inspired you to open up a restaurant group in the first place. But as you're thinking about it, on your website, um, in terms of in my interpretation of your mission and vision, you say that your team has strived to transcend boundaries, surpass expectations, and deliver excellence in hospitality. I absolutely love it. It's simple, it's to the point, it's intentional, it's measured, right? Can you talk about not only what inspired you to open up a restaurant group, but can you also talk about transcending boundaries in the hospitality industry? It's clear that guests expect more and explore more all the time, like we talked about earlier. But how do you push boundaries without overextending and without risk? Or is there some risk?
Yeah, there's a lot of information there. I never set out to open up several restaurants. It just kind of evolved into that. I really enjoy the process of creating and opening up new businesses. I love hospitality. Obviously, I love those creations, but I also really, to me, what I really enjoy is the new business prospects of things, and really opening up and looking at new visions, seeing like what could do well in the marketplace, seeing what trends are. I really look at our restaurants as restaurants, not concepts. And so, I feel like, that word gets thrown around a lot in our industry, which is great. And I understand, and there's a lot of people that are very successful with restaurant concepts. I look at restaurants because to me, there's some more authenticity to it. And that's just about like, hey, we're still homegrown and we're still, soulful, and we're still really thinking about what we want to do to grow our companies. I would say I'm very fortunate. Again, I can't do anything I don't have a strong team, and my teams are all that matter. It's my management teams, my culinary teams. Every person that's inside the restaurant is super valuable, and I'm super thankful. I don't get to tell them that as much because we have a lot of employees and I'm not around as much as I'd like to be, and it's just impossible. But it's those restaurants don't exist other than if it wasn't for them. And that's to me the heart and soul of our restaurant. And really fortunate to have the management teams, the culinary management teams that really harness and bring in an amazing teams to make everything work. So when we go to service every night, everything's there. As far as pushing the boundaries and is there risk? Yeah, there's risk all the time. I always say one of my quotes is be aware of the cliff. It's like, if you're not thinking about the cliffs right there in business or whatever it is, then you may not be paying attention to things as much as maybe you should, because there's a lot of volatility in any kind of business, and there's a lot of volatility in small business, and there's a lot of volatility in the restaurant business. And so you really got to, be sharpening your tools and getting better all the time, being able to be nimble, really be able to push the envelope. And, again, through the COVID experience, that was something that was where we learned a lot about how to, the word of the year, pivot, which, I think we're all tired of that. I'm tired of it. It's like, how do we get to how do we evolve and not pivot and really push the envelope? And so again, there's those things, and so you really just have to be aware. You really have to be conscious, and yeah, there's definitely been wins and there's definitely been losses. I mean, there's nothing. You can't go up the mountain and not come down the mountain. And so that's just how it goes. And so, if you're not willing to be that, I wouldn't say, I would say I'm not risk adverse, which is, probably a good thing and a bad thing. And so I think that that's something that, really helps me, is that instead of me thinking about, I see the potential of some negativity that can happen in any kind of business, but then I also see the upside and I can see the sunshine on the other side. And that's been a guiding light for me, for sure. The one, talking about at Carita, we're on the top floor of a building. We're, looking at the Flatirons, it's got a beautiful space and very fortunate to be here, but we're also on the top floor of a building. We're on Walnut Street, which is not the main thoroughfare. To get into the building is, it's quasi speakeasy-ish, to be honest with you. And so it's, for us to really to make this thing work was a stretch, but I knew those were some big obstacles, because you don't have, you can't drive by and see the restaurant. The restaurant's hidden. And so,
Yeah.
in order to make it work, it was like, we have reputation with Oak and Acorn at the time, but then also like, it's still a huge risk. And to see on the other side of that and to be successful in the space is something that's there. And then also the biggest thing too is not to take your success for granted, because it can go away. It's and you have to constantly be evolving, constantly be pushing, and constantly be thinking about it. And again, I'm very fortunate to have the teams that we do in the management meetings, and we go in and I listen to them a lot more these days on what they need to do to be more successful in their jobs. And I'm a lot more less rigid than I've been in the past to evolve with them and let them kind of drive the machines a little bit more this day, so I can keep creating and keep doing things that I want to do as well.
You've said that each concept is unique and has been developed with intention. I love that, without pretension, right? And pays
Yep.
tribute to Colorado's unmatched bounty, which I love. Is that important to you?
Absolutely. I think that, if you look at every one of our restaurants, it's got a tie back to Colorado culture and what it is from the American heritage of what we have in this state, and to where we can push the envelope and really like, work with local farmers, ranchers, and everything that we have here. It is a shorter grown season, but then, also we have a lot of outfits that are really, working hard year round to bring us fresh bounty and obviously produce from across the state. And so that's something that's really important. And the work local, whether that's hyper local or not, is something that's very important to us. In the industry, it's it's hard too, because it's cool to get a lot of interesting spices from across the globe. And so, we
Sure.
just have to be conscious about that. And our environmental footprint is something that's very important to me, and very much into regenerative agriculture and regenerative ranching. And it's something that I'm always pushing the envelope on, and something I'm very passionate about. I'd say that, kind of my first big mountain climb in hospitality has been the beverage world. And my second now is kind of, which I still haven't mastered that, just to be clear, I'm always learning. And I walk into the bar now and then I'll be like, oh, what is that spirit? Hey, can I taste it? Tell me this. So I'm learning from my teams now, which is great. But my second kind of next big challenge is to really work towards more of a regenerative agriculture, regenerative ranching world, and really help try to, change the world as much as we can, and have a footprint and a soapbox to kind of talk about those changes here at the restaurants.
Well said. Well said. And I should say thank you too, because I know that you and your team are committed to giving back to the community as well. One example of that is the No Kid Hungry organization. And, isn't it interesting, Bryan, that when you think about charity and you think about giving back, and not just in times of challenge, but our industry, the restaurant industry, the hospitality industry, they're always the first responders. I mean, it to charities, to catastrophes.
Yeah.
I remember the Marshall fires. I mean, God bless Andy, was the first to call me, Andy from Moxie, and we
Yep.
were cranking lasagnas out by 7 o'clock that next morning. I mean, God, I love this industry and I love the people in it.
Yeah, it's super inspiring. It's super inspiring, to see what Jose Andres has done on World
Unbelievable.
Kitchen. Is just like, it's insane. Every time you see something go down, like everything's going on in Syria right now. I mean, he was there within 24 hours, and it's mind boggling. But you're right. I think there's something about our industry that because we are such a human industry, and we do work with so many different people and walks of life on a daily basis, whether that's from our employees to the people that come through the door, that it does make us, and generally a little bit of a more caring world and understanding world, because we have I wouldn't say I always have the best patience, but it's definitely gotten better in my age. But you learn and you understand, and like what it takes and what the world needs, and giving back to that is something I see across the board with all of our our restaurant community, whether that's locally or nationally or internationally, for sure. And it's pretty amazing.
Well said. Well said. Hey, we have a little bit of time left. I'd really like to talk about, a common thread, sports and restaurants. So, along with being so immersed in our industry, you're a father, an ultramarathoner, a trail runner. You've trained for the Leadville 100, and I don't know if people really grasp the concept of whether on a bike or running, right?
Right.
It's an elite trail run. It's absolutely amazing. I was reading an interview, and you said running is a sport, and I look at the restaurant business as being a sport as well. You're on your feet, working super hard, looking in 20 different directions. You get the highs, you get the lows. I'd like to kind of just, cascade that into, I understand and appreciate that you keep a healthy lifestyle, which is so important in our business and really any business and in life. You do so by running, competing in marathon, once a year or more. You've said that if you're not taking care of yourself physically and mentally, you're no good to anyone. I totally agree. Can you speak a little bit to how these two worlds really intertwine in your opinion in your life? Because there's a lot of demand of you
Yep.
and life commitments, but how's the whole thing come together?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to think about it is it's cheap Prozac. It helps clear your mind, get you a little bit softer, get you ready for the day. In the grand scheme of it as well, just like you said about that quote, I very much parallel trail running, in particular running or any kind of sport, the dips and valleys of what it is to be an athlete and to be strong and to understand how you can, have good times and have bad times, and really how that volleys and how that can volley through a whole race. If you have, in my world, if you run a trail marathon, you could have two or three different experiences where you're feeling amazing and slaying it. And you could have two or three different experiences where you're like, what am I doing? I want to quit. This is awful. This is like insane. And I'd say the restaurant business is the same. I would say almost any kind of job, to be honest with you. It doesn't matter what you do. I think like, that we all have our amazing days. And even in that, time period that you're there for that day, amazing highs and amazing lows, because anything can be thrown at you. I think in the restaurant in particular, the restaurant business is an extremely physical job. And I think that's one thing that people don't think about. It's an extremely mental job. Yeah, we're not, surgeons or anything along those lines. But, at the end of the day, the teams work really hard. They're on their feet, 8 hours a day. They're mentally charged. And it doesn't matter what your position is. If you're back on working the line, working the grill station, you're dealing with sharp knives, you're dealing with fire, you're dealing with hot oils, you're dealing with like ticket times, which is pressure. Like you want to talk about 30 seconds and going down in an NBA game or NFL game or whatever it is. We do that 100 times a night all the time. And it's insane. Like people don't understand like what it takes for the teams to pull that off on the backside of the line. And then the same on the front side of the line, because we're going crazy, making sure the wine glasses are down, making sure the wine's being poured, making sure the silverware's set, making sure everything. I mean, it's this amazing symphony and orchestra of getting all those together. And so you're moving, again, physically and mentally all the time. And so really, to me, to be mentally and physically focused and taking care of yourself makes you a better, better human in general, in my opinion, and just helps softens you up and gives you a little more breathing space so you can tackle those problems. But then also, it trains you to be really great to where you can tackle some of these obstacles that come through in the restaurant business. And it's something I don't take for granted. It's something I don't take my team's time and effort and energy for granted. And it's just really, it's a demanding job, and full respect for anybody and everybody that's in this business for sure.
Really, really well said. So many guests have been restaurateurs or chefs, people close to the industry, and there's kind of this crazy theme. So it's either motorcycles, music, or exercise, or all of the above. So you've got the exercise, motorcycles, or music for you as well.
I love music. I'm listening to music all the time, and I do have a few motorcycles. So
I love it. I love it.
So
See?
yeah, so I like dirt bikes the best, to be honest with you, because again, I don't know, I can't stay out of the mountains and the trails, and I guess I just like that experience. But yeah, we've done it. Actually, a bunch of bartenders and I have driven. There's a big cocktail convention called Tales of the Cocktail every year in New Orleans, and then do the ride to Tales and drive from whatever part of the country to New Orleans on bikes. I've done that a couple of times with some of my bartender buddies, which is great and super fun and great camaraderie. And you do some pop-up bar shifts along the way, and so they're doing it this year from New York to New Orleans. I won't make it on this one, but super fun. And yeah, it's a thing. And I don't, motorcycles are great. You got to motorcycles, be careful too. So
yeah, I would have guessed it though. I've got one too in enduro, and I just love it.
Got one of those. It's my favorite.
Oh yeah. So from a music perspective, just from High Fidelity, top 3 bands of all time, go.
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm so diverse on everything. I listen probably a lot of Jay-Z. I probably listen to actually a decent amount of Sturgill Simpson. I listen to a lot of like electronic music too, so I'm pretty all over the space with it. So, I mean, I like to go to Spain and spend time in Spain, and, there's definitely a good electronic vibe there. So I really enjoy that.
I love it. I love it. U2's at the top of my list all the time, but yeah,
there you go. Nice.
A lot of variety underneath that. Hey, Bryan, the name of the podcast is The Ultimate Dish, and I always try to wrap it up with the hardest question of all. And so in your mind, it could be a memory or a real experience, but in your mind, what is the ultimate dish?
It's so hard to say. I've been so spoiled I'm fortunate to eat at a lot of amazing places with a lot of amazing people. And, and that's locally, that's with my children, that's, around the globe, and love it, and so it's hard to say what was the one. I have to say one of my most memorable, amazing experiences was we were down in Sherry, down in Cadiz, and we were with Alberto Orte, who's a phenomenal winemaker, sherry maker, and exports all over. And we did basically like a 7-course tasting menu for lunch. And, in sherry, they're like the only wine you need to drink is sherry, right? And so everybody thinks about sherry as far as like the cream sherries that and their grandma's closet and everything, but sherry's, can be extremely dry to extremely sweet. And so, and my best friend Diego was with me, and we're sitting there with Alberto, and there was this course. It was a Lagostino, or like a soft potato with this chorizo broth, and just really subtle, real small dish. And we were drinking some Macchiato sherry with that. And that experience, I just will never forget looking at Diego and looking at Alberto and being like, this pairing, this food, this thing is like the most out of the world experience I've ever had. And so that was probably like one of the most memorable times like in the industry. And then to be honest with you, if I can eat pho with my sons and have some laughs, that's where I want to be all the time.
Perfect. I got chills. The chorizo broth got me going there.
So good.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Bryan, thank you for being with us. Really appreciate it. Best of continued luck, and we'll see you at the bar soon.
I can't wait. I appreciate all the support. Thank you for having me today. It really means a lot. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Ultimate Dish Podcast, brought to you by Auguste Escoffier School of Culinary Arts. Visit escoffier.edu/podcast, where you'll find any materials mentioned during the podcast, including notes, links, and other resources. You can also browse other episodes and subscribe.